Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I just got back from a gun show, barbecued for everybody, and it's good being back in Texas. First Q&A back, and yes, I am clearly back in Texas. Oh, that shit's legal in the UK. I did, however, get a really awesome hat today at the gun show. Got my American flag with an M16 on it. But let's get to these Q&As. All right, first question. Do you have an opinion on box squats? Why, yes. Yes, I do. I don't like box squats for raw lifters. I don't like them for most field athletes. Some field athletes, they can be good depending upon what you're doing. What is the main use for box squats? If you are an equipped lifter, whether it is single ply or multiply, box squats are an absolutely amazing and possibly indispensable tool. So you should probably do them and do them often. In fact, Westside Barbell, which is the pretty much one of the best gyms out there for training equipped lifters, rely very, very heavily upon the box squat. It works. They've proven it. But outside of that, I think they can train certain patterns, particularly for raw lifters. They can train motor patterns and things that are not necessarily helpful for you. However, the caveat being, if you are a novice lifter who has certain issues, who really struggles with the mobility and to sit down correctly and reach depth, then using box squats for a complete novice can be a really good tool, particularly for training mobility and things. They have their use there. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. Just wondering if you could explain why being on gear makes people stronger aside from increased hypertrophy. I think I remember you mentioning in one of your videos that it can affect a person's nervous system. Could you please elaborate? Okay, as far as it affecting the nervous system, yes, it can to some extent, but this depends on how androgenic the compound is. Some are far, far more effective at this than others, and some don't do this at all. Yeah, it binds to the androgen receptors of the brain. It can increase aggression, it can increase focus, and maybe to some extent neural efficiency they can to make you just a tiny, tiny little bit stronger. However, the overwhelming majority of the strength that you gain from any sort of anabolic is going to come directly from the tissue hypertrophy it gives you. And a bigger muscle and a stronger muscle. It's pretty straightforward there. So that's really the reason. And of course, again, in making weight classes, it's easier to maintain strength and muscle mass while dieting leaner, thus getting to a lower body weight or a better body composition inside your weight class through the use of them. So they also offer an advantage there. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. What peak week protocol would you recommend for a natural bodybuilding competitor? Thanks. Love your channel. Okay, what I recommend for the natural competitor, first of all, I don't recommend that you compete at all in bodybuilding. I don't recommend dieting down that lane. I don't think it's healthy, and I agree with John Hollywood, who said that, who's a coach that I recommend, who said that it is particularly even more unhealthy for natural people who are not putting exogenous hormones in their body, because the fact that your testosterone levels and everything else are going to crater as a result of it. It's not physically healthy. It's not psychologically healthy. So I can't recommend that you do it at all. Natural bodybuilding is absurdly unhealthy, and then of course the heavily enhanced bodybuilding is also absurdly unhealthy, so you can't really win. However, if you are going to do it and you insist upon doing it, I have to recommend that you get a prep coach who will walk you through it, a very experienced prep coach to walk you through it, such as, again, my friend John Hollywood, my friend Mark Lobliner. Any of these people can coach you successfully to do this. Don't do it on your own. All right, next question. How important are accessory exercises when trying to maintain size during a cut, i.e. skull crushers, shrugs, curls, etc.? Well, accessory movements take a back seat. Let's be honest here. Accessory movements like that are used to bring up a weak point, or whether it's an aesthetic weak point or a performance weak point, some weak muscle, some weak link in the chain. That's really what they're there for. That's what accessory work and isolation work is there for. However, they should never be your meat and potatoes. and you're trying to maintain when you're cutting, you're probably not going to make a lot of progress, minimal if any. So if you're focused on just doing your important and primary exercises and maintaining performance on those, it is going to maintain your muscle mass and your performance best. So you don't need to focus very much on them at all. You can focus on them a bit. There's certainly nothing wrong with a bit, but I wouldn't put a great deal of focus on them when cutting. They don't have the same benefits that they do when you're trying to actually make real gains. So it's kind of a misallocation of resources to put much time and effort into them. All right, next question. How to effectively prevent hips shooting up and lower back rounding in heavy deadlifts. This is really more of a mental cue than anything. First of all, you're probably lifting too much weight. So assuming that you're lifting an appropriate amount of weight, you need to learn to pull backwards more. You need to focus upon pulling the slack out of the bar, pulling back, driving through the heels, and using your body as a fulcrum so that you can rock backwards to come out of the hole rather than just try to lift and stay bent over. So the main cue is, again, any sort of the movements that you use to pull back, whether it's a drop like you guys see me do, or whether it's a bar roll. And it's very possibly you may have your hips too low already. So you might also want to consider raising your starting point for your hips a little bit. Your hips just simply may be too low if you're able to just shoot them up. So there's all of those techniques that you need to use and consider. So it could be the technique, those technique mental cues could help a lot, or it simply could be an issue if you're starting with your hips too low, combined with probably using more weight than you're really capable of lifting. So check your ego at the door, do it right. All right, next question. I want to try what you have said, that if you are above 15% body fat, then you don't need to be at a surplus to build muscle. Should I do straight maintenance or do calorie cycling like surplus on training days and deficit at off days? I don't know what makes you think that you're going to gain muscle by having deficit days. I don't see how this is going to help you recover at all or have proper glycogen replenishment. You could just be at maintenance, but the calorie cycling like that is certainly not going to help you in any way. And the difference is you're talking about training days versus other. You don't burn that many calories when you are training from weights. You don't burn as many as you think you do. You might burn an extra 100 calories that day. It's simply not going to make enough of a difference to where you should really cycle calories like that. Plus, you're not getting the extra recovery benefits and additional glycogen stores from the food on the off days doing that. That's nowhere near ideal. If you want to do something like that, you could simply do a method to where you just eat at maintenance. Yeah, calorie cycling just isn't really something that you need to do for this sort of goal. I mean, calorie cycling has its place for certain people, but certainly not people who just want a recomposition of up above 15%. Just eat at maintenance and you will probably be just fine. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. What advantages does one have having used PEDs in the past when comparing to a lifetime natty? Well, I hate the word natty because, it's such a buzz phrase. It has no real meaning outside of just whatever subjective context you give it. But that being said, I know what you mean. So let's talk about the actual differences. Well, it's subject to a lot of debate. We know that people lose a lot, if not most of their gains when they go on drugs. However, there has certainly been data out there that's shown over the years that when people use them for any extended period of time, they do see some satellite cell proliferation, which means forming new muscle cells that stays. And they see in a lot of the muscles, they'll see a increase in cell nucleus count in their muscle cells. So this may make those muscles more receptive to training and things in the future. So it may let them rebound and gain muscle and possibly even experience things like you would almost similar like muscle memory much easier than someone who's never been on anything. And as far as we can tell, these things last for years. I think there's been data out there that has shown up to at least 3 to 5 years, if not more, these things last after the fact. So that being said, is there a permanent change? Yeah, there does certainly seem to be. So it really is true that once someone has gone in and done a few blasts or cycles, quite a few of them, and they gotten them under the belt, so they've been on drugs for any extended period of time, there do seem to be some permanent changes that happen. They're never really truly lifetime drug-free. They're just not anymore. All right, next question and last question in part 1. Can you explain the importance of pulling the slack out of the bar on deadlifting? Yeah, the thing with pulling the slack out of the bar, this serves a number of different purposes. But primarily upon that list is the fact that it is a mental cue to get you pulled backwards, is to let you get some inertia going because you are doing a deadlift. You're pulling from a dead stop. It's hard to store any energy. It's hard to get any inertia going. So by pulling back on the bar, it lets you prime your nervous system a bit and get into the act of pulling back and up before you fully engage. So in some ways, it lets you get a little bit of a cheat to get started. And there's also the fact that it pulls any bend out of your elbows. It pulls your elbows straight. So by pulling that slack out of your bar, things like your biceps are having to work less hard when you do the pull, and it puts less strain on things like your bicep tendons, so you have a smaller chance of rupturing a bicep, which should be a major concern when you're deadlifting heavy, and that's one of the methods you can use to reduce that chance. You don't want to be like me. If you guys can see my surgical scar where they reattached mine many years ago when I tore it off the bone in 2004, pulling slack out of the bar can help reduce that. So it has some potential benefits there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.